The angle of the statement and evidence began with the misuse of the term trust and the associated terms or strategies deployed by McClure Solicitors and their partners. And these partners, to name a few, are Age Concern, now of course Age UK, and Maggie's, and the Newcastle Building Society, as well as other financial institutions. In the healthcare industry and in practice, there are two important and overarching principles relating to client care. The first is trust, and the second is the principle of informed consent. Now, both principles and their application in human services are no different, actually, to any other regulatory body requirements in the United Kingdom. People who hold specialist and/or expert knowledge engage with members of the public from a position of power. At a simple level, this can be seen as power over, or in practical terms, it is known as legitimate and expert power. Fundamentally, clients are encouraged to place an element of trust in this partnership, and for most, there is an understanding that this involves an unequal power dynamic. Mirroring this principle from the perspective of a solicitor's practice, we would be right to assume that a dereliction of duty, whereby critical information is not explained in simple terms, or is withheld or obfuscated, note the complex term, this indeed is then a serious matter. And it includes the legal language used, which is based on feudal terms, so Old English, that serve no less than to confuse and obstruct understanding at a very base level. And to add to the gravity of this, if we, as clients, are seeking advice on the protection of our collective wealth, which generally sits below the inheritance tax threshold, we expect a person in a position of trust to act with integrity. If we as healthcare professionals certainly cannot give account as to how we acquired informed consent from clients, and it can be proven when we subsequently act, well, this has very serious consequences for us professionally. Solicitors are therefore no less, or should be no less, accountable on this principle. From the client perspective, and when trust is established, the argument here is that it becomes an inroad for unscrupulous solicitors. And at this point, he or she can choose to either give clear explanation of the consequences of the person's actions, i.e. the settlers, or give ambiguous accounts, which at that point and or in future will, without any doubt, be detrimental. So it goes without saying then that this relationship is fiduciary, so it's related to financial aspects, and that there is profit to be made really from situations of ambiguity or lack of understanding. And in the case of McClure Solicitors, this uncertainty with ill-defined explanations are tantamount to significant harm. Now, this harm is multifaceted, and it can be seen from the perspective of all the client victims affected. But significantly, it has had and continues to have considerable and dire health consequences for people aged 70 years plus. Many, outlined in the accounts that we are aware of, are isolated, with some who are not in a position to ask family for support. These vulnerable adults were told that if they transferred deeds to family as trustees, they would lose control, thus ironically creating a situation of mistrust at the very level of those who know them best and can support them. There are a number of other reasons, but there are too many to list here. The aggressive way in which these trust funds were sold has created division in some families. In the first instance, the ambiguity and language of fear that has been used in official website statements and correspondence has and continues to have a direct impact on mental well-being. Many, if not all, fear that at death their homes will become or are already owned by professional trustees, not the beneficiaries, and that they cannot make the necessary changes or do not have the mental capacity or energy to do so. You only have to look at the barrage of questions and confusion in the victim's Facebook page and the private action group forum to realise the complexity of individual matters. Indeed, in Mike's report, there was ample evidence to suggest that this is the case, and many members, including those who do not yet know of the issues, have great difficulty in articulating their concerns. Those who are marginalised, vulnerable to ill health and mobility issues, abused and, for instance, financially exploited, as indeed even the Law Society in 2023 referred to, face insurmountable health deficits. They are at risk of serious mental ill health. The last 2 years of my own mother's life were lived in fear. She was a very fiercely independent woman. Her health deteriorated dramatically, both physically and emotionally. She was often in a state of abject panic due to not only the demise of McClure Solicitors, but also the statements listed online by Jones and Wyatt. My inability to act as her enduring power of attorney added to her anxiety before and during the pandemic. This attorney, which was paid for in 2018, was never registered, so I had to pay for services and goods as her bank would not provide her with statements. She became naturally very low because she was unable to keep up with her finances, thought she was constantly in debt, and felt very dependent as she relied so much on me. Fear, as a marker and precursor to deterioration in health, is well documented in the research, and I provided references outlining that case to the police. The reliance on internet knowledge and use of it, including passwords to organise utilities, banking and other necessary and often critical daily living tasks, means that this particular group of people are extremely open to being exploited and are for the most part marginalised. It's sadly ironic then that this collective group of people, whilst really holding considerable power in terms of their assets, are nonetheless open to exploitation and the might of powerful institutions. The misappropriation of assets, misleading language and fraud set against cleverly orchestrated bureaucracies, such as what we found in Companies House, make it near impossible for these people to set right or deal with the harm McClure has caused. And when they do, they are near exhaustion, mentally and physically. Every citizen must pay taxes, but the industry on which this rests has become so complex that even some of the professionals associated with it are at times confounded. It's not difficult to see what kind of quagmire tech and language savvy people have then in deciphering it, let alone older people. The other irony is that the damaging legal advice given on trust funds has eroded confidence in the consultation with solicitors who maintain they can help, and has, in my view, precipitated the death of many.